Before alien Earth brings xenomorphs to our own doorstep, here's a complete reference guide into how this complicated, messy, perfect organism ticks. This is an egg. This is a facehugger. This is a chest burster. This is a xenomorph. In the basic movie life cycle, it's pretty simple. Whenever a suitable life form encounters an egg, an ovomorph for the folks in the back, their presence activates a biological trigger that opens the egg and releases the facehugger inside. These things are leapers, and although they can survive outside of the egg for an extended period of time, they really have only one purpose: getting a proboscis down a throat to implant a chest-burster embryo. Once that's done, they stay alive long enough to make sure the host also stays alive and to answer Parker's question.
Hey, how the hell's he breathing?
They feed their victim oxygen while their baby incubates. That's technically where the xenomorph's real life starts. Inside a warm, roomy chest cavity, the chestburster grows for about a day or longer or shorter, depending on pacing needs, until it's big enough to look for the easiest way out, straight through the breastplate. At this stage in its life, the xenomorph is small and vulnerable, so it retreats to undergo a series of successive molts and, as we saw in Romulus, a brief cocoon stage, getting much larger over a short amount of time and developing a hard carapace and a retractable inner set of jaws strong enough to punch through, well, just about everything. This is the classic xenomorph, a strong, nightmarishly fast organism with veins pumping acidic blood and a segmented tail to spear soft humans and carry them away. So where do xenomorphs take people? Or maybe the better question is, why do xenomorphs take people? Well, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just want people dead because they see us as a threat to their hive. When they do take people, though, it's so they can become new hosts for facehuggers. And if they're, say, alone on a spaceship with no queen, they're actually capable of turning people into eggs. When Ripley finds Dallas in the director's cut of Alien, he's in the process of becoming an ovomorph that could potentially create a new xenomorph, possibly even a queen. It's sort of a dirty, inefficient way to expand a hive, but it's a terrifying concept because it shows just how adaptable these creatures are, and it makes Ripley's concerns about their potential for utter devastation all the more real.
Because if one of those things gets down here, then that will be old, and all this bullshit that you think is so important, you can just kiss all that goodbye.
In other words, one xenomorph plus at least 2 humans more often than not equals 2 xenomorphs. One xenomorph plus 8 billion humans, and, well, you get the idea. When an alien isn't MacGyvering a new nest from scraps, it's usually because there's a queen around to do it the right way. Queens are pretty recognizable compared to a regular xenomorph, to say the least. They're 15 to 20 feet tall, with a huge bulging sac called an ovipositor that mass produces eggs to expand the hive. One downside is that the egg-laying process makes her sedentary, which in turn makes her vulnerable to attack, which is partly why xenomorphs are so keen on protecting their hive. But even if someone comes along and blasts the nest to smithereens, queens have an ace up their sleeves. They can rip themselves free of the ovipositor and go on the offensive to take care of the threat. Biologically, alien queens get their start via royal facehuggers. These are pretty much the same thing as a regular facehugger, but with a few differences. 1, they're bigger, and 2, they can go around infecting multiple people or oxen before they die. That lets them stick a new queen into something, but also create a regular xenomorph or two to protect the queen. Alright, quick sidebar. Look at this. Take a close look. Would you call it a drone or a warrior? What about this? They're obviously different, but how different? It's the debate that won't die. Are warriors and drones 2 names for the same thing? And if not, are warriors older, more mature drones, or do they belong to 2 separate castes within the hive? You could burn out your retinas reading through 20+ years of discussions about it on alien forums, only to realize hours later that to this day, nobody can fully agree. Drones make sense. They operate as a hive and protect their queen, and nobody wants them around, just like bees.
But I kinda got my hands full with these babies.
Got bees! No bees!
Warriors also make sense because, well, no explanation really needed there.
Come on! Get it, baby!
The original 1983 treatment for aliens is to blame for a lot of this. It described warriors as the murdery types, while drones were smaller, white, and took care of all the gooey secretions involved in building the hive. Some people point to the rigid head designs in that movie as a vestigial artifact of that separate caste system, aka warriors have ridges. But even that design element was a product of chance. The smooth head props kept breaking. As more games, novels, and comics came along, the distinction got ever murkier. Aliens Fireteam Elite, for example, has separate drones and warriors, but it also has a butt ton of other variants because the developers had to shake up the gameplay somehow. So again, the distinction is just a product of necessity. As far as the movies are concerned, it really doesn't matter. Like, at all. And since movies make things even more complicated, let's stick with those for a little bit longer. So, to recap, everything up until Alien 3 was based on human hosts. The big chap came out of Cain, and all those Xenos and aliens had their buns cooked in the Hadley's Hope colonist ovens. Alien 3 switched things up. Remember this guy who we showed a little earlier? He gestated inside an ox. This one's the same alien, but it came out of a dog. What Alien 3 did was show that a chestburster that came out of a four-legged animal has different traits and characteristics than one that came out of a two-legged animal.
I haven't seen one exactly like this before. Moves differently.
Like Ripley said, the xenomorph stalking the tunnels of Fury 161 in Alien 3 is a little more bestial than the ones that came before it. Its back legs are jointed like a quadruped's, it moves on all fours more often, and it's, in general, a mean, animalistic son of a
Amen.
The details don't really matter. The important thing to remember for later is that these creatures are DNA thieves. They take aspects of their hosts and incorporate them into their own form. If it's a dog, they become vaguely good boys. If a predator gets a parasitic facial, it creates a predalien, which has the distinct feature of being in a movie so dark you can't see any of its distinct features. But you can see the pattern here. There's even a theory that facehuggers don't implant a physical embryo. Instead, they force the host body to use its own genetic material to grow a chestburster, like a tumor. Either way, the result is the same. Every species spawns a slightly different xenomorph. Aliens can even facehug themselves if they really want to. Could the same thing happen to, say, a cat or a fish or a goat? We'll get to that in a little bit, because first we have to talk about
Prometheus fire. The divine gift to humanity.
Call it what you want. Prometheus fire, chemical X03959X.91-15, David's dirty shower, it's all the same thing. Pure nightmare potential, the sticky molasses of Eldritch death. The black goo is the starting point for every conceivable possibility, a pathogen that mutates whatever it touches. Sometimes a mutation makes sense. Worms exposed to the goo become bigger, angrier worms called hammerpedes, but sometimes it's more chaotic. Fifield got a face full of goo and went down the same path as Halloway, just a gross, weird smorgasbord of mutations. He became what's known among Prometheus scholars as an anathema, which is sort of a catch-all term for the goo exposed. What's the end result of that abomination? If this engineer is anything to go on, the point, from the goo's point of view, is to break down the anathema's body right to the DNA and spread into the environment where it can continue mutating more life forms. Think of it as a fountain of life, if life was death. Let's look at a fun example of that. Sometimes you wish for the simpler days when an egg could just make a facehugger, could just make a chestburster, could just make a xenomorph. But we're well past that, for better or worse. Once the goo comes into play, it's not just the species that dictates what an alien ultimately looks like. The pathway of infection also plays a crucial role. Take the Holloway-Shaw engineer love triangle. It's one of the trickier sequences of events to wrap your head around, but it's also the best example of how different variables matter. So, Holloway drinks the worst cocktail of his life and immediately passes the pathogen to Shaw. She's sterile, but this thing doesn't care. She starts growing a tentacled baby, all while Holloway steadily falls apart from the bits of pathogen still in him. After Holloway attends the worst barbecue of his life, Shaw cuts out the life form, a trilobite, which rapidly grows to full size like a xenomorph and also hugs faces like a facehugger. The face it hugs belongs to an engineer who gives chest birth to a deacon. It's a convoluted road, and it's possible that changing any one of those factors could have changed the deacon's final appearance, or anything else. Did that urn from which David procured the goo already have all the DNA needed to make the trilobite specifically, or did it scavenge some stuff from its trip through Holloway and Shaw? If the trilobite had gotten a hold of Shaw, would the resulting creature have become more xenomorph-like by taking more of her human DNA at that stage in its growth? It's fun to wonder, but the truth is, wondering ignores the core message of Prometheus, which is that you don't know jack and you never will.
There is nothing special about the creation of life, right? Anybody can do it. I mean, all you need is a dash of DNA and half a brain.
And that may not even have been the deacon's final form. Stick with us. But in the comic Prometheus Fire and Stone Omega, one of the characters speculates that the deacon continued mutating into a living mountain around the Prometheus ship over more than a century. There's so much potential in the goo, it's almost stupid, but we're still just getting started. Alien Covenant added a whole lot of fuel to the it's not a baby, it's a tumor fire. By this point, we don't need embryos to birth aliens. It doesn't even seem to matter how the pathogen gets in the body, whether through an ear, a nose, a mouth, or a facehugger. Guaranteed, something bad is about to start growing. The pathogen, which has mutated to spread from local life forms like Puffballs, can now directly infect people, and in a matter of hours grow into mobile little aliens called neomorphs that pop out ready to do business. It's basically turning the planet into a bioweapon. But one thing that David figured out, which the engineers also figured out much earlier, is that this goo can be guided and modified into creating specific creatures, like xenomorphs. And so we come back full circle. What David realized is that if you want the finished puzzle to be a xenomorph, you need the right pieces: egg, facehugger, and human. He's still not quite there. His eggs aren't quite as evolved, his chestburster is a little too goofy, and his xenomorph, or protomorph if you're a stickler, isn't as intricately formed as a regular xeno, but he's close, and that's what counts. So here's a question. Why fixate on xenomorphs? He could be trying to make some sort of better human, since that's what he's all about. Remember, humans have engineered DNA, and David had access to engineered DNA and a human for a while, so why try so hard to be Sid from Toy Story and make the weirdest shit possible? The unsatisfying answer is that he's in an alien movie, and his logic is the same as everyone else's.
I found perfection here. I've created it. Perfect organism.
Perfection is what the scientists on the Renaissance station in Aliens Romulus were after too. They reeled in the big chap from the vacuum of space and not only cloned multiple facehuggers, but extracted black goo from the xenomorph's DNA and distilled it back to its pure essence. They at least wanted better humans to give Weyland-Yutani an edge on deep space exploration, but that didn't work either. Even a fetus exposed to the Z01 pathogen turned into something you wouldn't want to take a trip to space with, which sort of cuts to the heart of what this bioweapon is all about. It can't be controlled. It's even questionable whether the engineers had full control of it.
It's an installation, maybe even military. And they put it out here in the middle of nowhere because they're not stupid enough to make weapons of mass destruction on their own doorstep.
Whether aliens mutate on their own or whether well-funded scientists employed by a sinister corporation get free rein to tamper with them, the possibilities are whatever a writer or visual artist can dream up. And they've dreamed up a lot. You've got elite Praetorian guards, you've got a human-like goddess xenomorph, you've got biomechanical maniacs living in harmony with xenomorph DNA.
Marines!
Where the hell did he come from?
Shoot, give it a few hundred years and you've got alien queens with human wombs giving birth to hybrid alien newborns with human genetic material. Nothing ever turns out good with this stuff. One xenomorph trait that shows up regularly is that, when the situation calls for it, there have been individual xenomorphs that rise above the herd and lead the others. Those are termed alphas. Most people consider the big chap an alpha, but there are others. The one that got maimed by the Predator's net in Alien vs. Predator eventually became the de facto leader of the pack. And that total a-hole stalking the Sevastopol in alien isolation is usually considered an alpha. It's smart, stealthy, and learns quickly if you keep trying the same tricks on it. Some stories turn alphas into their own subtype, but most of the time when someone refers to an alpha, they're talking about a regular xeno that stepped up to the challenge. We'd love to see more of that explored in a future Alien movie, although we can't exactly say the same about all these next variants. If you really want to get into the weeds of what's possible with aliens, you may find yourself down a rabbit hole with no bottom. We're not going to go in depth on every xenomorph variant in existence. There are so many across the expanded lore that it'd be easier to spend a week alone on LV-426 than it would be to describe them all. But once you understand that they can adapt the DNA of just about anything, the possibilities open up.
We were going to be gods, but we tampered with something we should have left alone.
Like we mentioned, they can grow from aquatic creatures and become aquatic themselves, which happened in the Aliens Colonial Marines comic. Gorillas? Birds? The sky's the limit, folks. Make it part vampire if you want, what the hell? Even if you step away from pure biology, you've got stuff like the Xenoborg, a laser-slinging cybernetic alien found in the 1999 Aliens vs. Predator game. Of course, out of all these, it's worth mentioning one variant that could be canon if anyone ever put it into a movie. We know that deacons come from engineers, but as far as we can tell, that only happens after that long, convoluted process with the black goo. But what if an engineer just got straight up face-hugged? In the 1979 film, there's a hole in the space jockey's chest when they first explored the derelict craft, suggesting that something came out. What would that look like? Aliens Infestation imagined a possible space jockey xenomorph with a big dangling proboscis, but that was before Prometheus clarified that the trunk-like structure was just part of the helmet. There are other better examples of what kind of horrifying creature it might be, although we have yet to see it in live action. Unfortunately, you probably shouldn't expect to see it in Alien Earth. No spoilers for the show, but creator Noah Hawley told Empire magazine weeks before the premiere that Earth was going to sidestep a lot of the larger world building. He said, "The first movie came out in 1979 and Prometheus came out in 2012. So you're talking about close to 40 years in which there was no black goo, no David, no engineers. Alien, for me, is baked in as those creatures that have existed for millions of years. They're the perfectly evolved species." In other words, if you're trying to catch up before you watch Alien Earth, you probably could have stopped watching this video about 3 or 4 minutes in, before all the black goo stuff. Sorry about that. No, I'm not.